Elon Musk in some hot water over Starlink, SpaceX, and Ukraine. This is from the New York Times. Elon Musk acknowledges withholding satellite service to thwart Ukrainian attack. The Starlink satellite internet service, which is operated by Mr. Musk's rocket company SpaceX, has been a digital lifeline for soldiers and civilians in Ukraine. This is from the New York Times. A top advisor to Ukraine's president accused Elon Musk of enabling Russian aggression after the billionaire entrepreneur acknowledged denying satellite internet service in order to prevent a Ukrainian drone attack on a Russian naval fleet last year. The Starlink satellite internet service, which is operated, by Mr. Musk's rocket company SpaceX, has been a digital lifeline in Ukraine since the early days of the war for both civilians and soldiers in areas where digital infrastructure has been wiped out. On Thursday, CNN reported on an excerpt from Walter Isaacson's upcoming biography, Elon Musk, later published by the Washington Post, said that the billionaire had ordered the deactivation of the Starlink satellite service near the coast of Crimea last September to thwart the Ukrainian attack. The excerpt said that Mr. Musk has conversations with a Russian official that led him to worry that an attack on Crimea could spiral into a nuclear conflict. Later on Thursday, Mr. Musk responded on his social media platform to say that he hadn't disabled the service, but had rather refused to comply with an emergency request from Ukrainian officials to enable Starlink connections to Sevastopol on the occupied Crimean Peninsula. Pardon me. See, the thing about doing a show solo is you don't get to rest your vocal cords while your co-host talks. So I'm going to have to go for the water in a moment. That was, in effect, an acknowledgement that he had made the decision to prevent a Ukrainian attack. Now, this is from the CNN reporting on that, where they actually report on the excerpt from Isaacson's book, where Elon Musk says to his biographer, "How am I in this war?" Musk asks Isaacson. "Starlink was not meant to be involved in wars. It was so people can watch Netflix and chill and get online for school and do good, peaceful things, not drone strikes." All right, there's some inconsistencies here because he says, "How am I in this war?" Well, Elon Musk donated this service to Ukraine. So he was definitely willing to help Ukraine fight Russia, which means he's not necessarily a man of peace. Now, he might be parsing, well, I saw the Ukraine war as a defensive war at the outset, but now that it seems maybe he's gotten a little red-pilled on this, maybe he now sees that actually this conflict was egged on by NATO, and so in a certain sense, the Ukrainian effort is a war of offense on the West's behalf. Perhaps he's a little red-pilled there, but it's certainly the case that he has been supportive of Ukraine from the start of this. That's why they're able to use his service to begin with. The Starlink regions in question were not activated, he tweets out on September 7th, 6:31 p.m. This is when this story broke. Keep in mind, folks, this is in relation to a story that happened last year, right? The Ukrainian attack in question was in 2022. News is just breaking now that this book is coming out. I love, by the way, how these biographers sit on all this real scandalous information for a year, right? It's like it's in the public interest to know it, but because I have a book coming out in a year, I'm just going to sit on it, and so the public can wait to know this until I can sell my book once it's done. He goes on, both sides should agree to a truce. Every day that passes, more Ukrainian and Russian youth die to gain and lose small pieces of land with borders barely changing. This is not worth their lives at 6:41. And then at 6:48, there was an emergency request from government authorities to activate Starlink all the way to the Sevastopol, the obvious intent being to sink most of the Russian fleet at anchor. If I had agreed to their request, then SpaceX would be explicitly complicit in a major act of war and conflict escalation. Okay, so what he's saying is I didn't deactivate any existing service. I simply refused to comply with requests to activate emergency service for this Ukrainian attack on Crimea, which, of course, is a red line for Russia. So the fear is absolutely legitimate that had he participated in that, he would have been complicit in escalating the war. So that's all valid. But it's not good enough for the media, especially Rachel Maddow, who in a segment on this had this to say about Elon Musk.
So, I mean, not to get too simple here, but Mr. Musk is American. He's an American citizen. And it is the explicit, out loud, not at all hidden, totally overt, totally emphatic policy of the United States government to support Ukraine in its war against Russia after Russia invaded them. We provide Ukraine, our ally, lots of military aid.
Sorry, I have to play this again because this is just kind of hilarious.
Out loud, not at all hidden, totally overt, totally emphatic policy of the United States government to support Ukraine in its war against Russia.
You wouldn't want to defy the totally overt and emphatic policy of the United States government under any circumstances, would you? Oh, yeah, you would when Donald Trump is president, right? When the government is not a government that you approve of. At that point, you have a duty to resist the emphatic position of the United States government. Now that the good people are in charge, now that the Democrats are in charge, now that the nice, effete liberals are in charge, now it's an act of treason to defy the emphatic policy of the United States government. Hey, if you don't want oligarchs defying the wishes of the Pentagon, then maybe you shouldn't entrust rich people, private citizens, for-profit actors with those capabilities. To her credit, actually, that's basically what Liz Warren said this week, right? And she said, look, we just shouldn't put this power in their hands. Now, where she's coming from is totally hideous and vile, right? She's upset that he didn't help escalate the war. But at least that's an argument. At least that's a sound point. Hey, this is what the military-industrial complex is. You put this power in the hands of these private actors with the expectation that they will play ball because they're getting contracts. The problem with Elon Musk, the problem when you entrust that power to one of the 5 richest men in the world, is that Elon Musk has what we call in the business, fuck you money, right? Where he doesn't need the contract. And in this case, he wasn't even getting paid for the service. He was donating those services because he wanted to help Ukraine fight the Russians. But she goes on.
Russia invaded them. We provide Ukraine, our ally, lots of military aid and training and intelligence and all sorts of other assistance. They are our ally in that war. But there's this one American private citizen who is intervening to try to stop Ukraine from winning the war, to try to stop Ukraine from defending itself against this Russian invasion, trying to stop it and, in fact, stopping it by turning their communication lines on and off at will as he sees fit, or as someone sees fit.
And who might that someone be? Any guesses in the chat? Who might she be referring to as that someone, given Rachel Maddow's record, right? Who might that someone be? Let's go back to this thread here because Glenn Greenwald had a good response to this segment. Listen for yourself to see how fascist these people are. And I mean fascist in the classic historical sense, not online speak for not a Democrat. Maddow thinks all U.S. citizens are duty-bound to make themselves and their property available to serve U.S. war policy. Absolutely correct take, and absolutely fascism. But who was she talking about? Who is she talking about? I see some guesses. They look like good guesses. Let's go to another media stooge, David Ignatius from the Washington Post. He interviewed Walter Isaacson about his book, and he puts things a little bit more on the nose.
Start by asking you about Elon Musk's newest public admirer, Vladimir Putin. Putin said yesterday at an economic forum in Vladivostok, when it comes to private business, Elon Musk, he is, without a doubt, an outstanding person, one has to admit. I think everyone would admit that all around the world, he is an active, talented businessman. That's a real gee-whiz comment from Vladimir Putin.
The type of compliment you don't want to get.
Well, maybe, but it does lead people to wonder about this relationship. There are times when you wonder almost if it's a bromance. And I want to ask you about what you've learned about Musk's contacts with Putin. Has he spoken with him, as it's often been suggested? What does he think about him? And maybe most to the point, if Donald Trump became president, what sort of relationship would you imagine that Musk would have with Putin?
Oh, my.
Well, let's start with whether or not
Donald Trump would make him the ambassador. That's what I think. I think Elon Musk will be Secretary of State under a Donald Trump administration, and we'd give all of Ukraine to Putin. That's what I think. No, let's hear his answer, because his answer is good. Don't forget, this is the guy who wrote the book, right? So this is a good source of information here. So here we go.
Talk to Putin. I know some people have said that Musk goes around saying, "Oh, I talked to Putin." Whenever I talked to Musk, he said, "No, I talked to the Russian ambassador, somebody, and sometimes I get messages, of what this is, what Soviet Russian policy is." But as far as I know, he told me he had no direct conversations with President Putin. And as far as his relationship, he has this almost hero complex. So as you know full well, when the Russians invaded Ukraine, he immediately came to the aid of Ukraine. And Viasat, the satellite company, its satellites were all disabled. Even the U.S. and other military couldn't do satellite communication. So Ukraine, as Vice Minister Fedorov has said often, would have been crushed had Starlink, had SpaceX and Musk not rushed in Starlink satellites. So I think that he still is quite in favor of protecting Ukraine. I also know from talking to him, he thinks that this war has gone on quite a long time, and perhaps a ceasefire would be useful now.
Yeah, so it seems like, according to his biographer, Elon has undergone a transformation of sorts from being staunchly pro-Ukraine, which is why he donated these services in the first place, to now thinking, hey, the war's gone on too long. It's not worth this outrageous loss of life. And I don't want to be complicit in crossing a Russian red line, which could escalate the war further and cause an exponentially greater loss of life. And to the people who have a problem with that, they have to understand it's very important to cite these numbers. And I've cited these a few times, but I feel it's very important to cite these numbers, right? In Bakhmut alone, which is one city where the fighting went on for a little over 1 year, Ukrainians, the Ukrainian people who are the ultimate victims of this war, lost 75,000 people. 75,000 in 1 year in one city. The United States lost fewer than 5,000 troops throughout the entire Iraq war. And so you talk about the devastation that war causes and the horrific death count of this war in just the first year and a half. That's the question that you have to ask yourself. Do you want to be complicit in escalating it even further? And the explanation on Isaacson's part makes perfect sense. That Elon wanted to help the Ukrainians fight, so he's not exactly anti-war. Misty was very emphatic that I say that, and so I agree with her because we were going to do this segment with her, but there was just a lot of video involved, and so I didn't want to have her wait and watch video because she only had an hour. But she said, don't call Elon anti-war, whatever you do. Good point. Point taken. Point taken. He started this out as a Ukraine hawk, which is why they have access to those systems in the first place. But now it seems like he thinks it's gone too far and he doesn't want to take it further, which seems reasonable to me. Does not seem reasonable to David Ignatius, nor Rachel Maddow, nor Jake Tapper. Here's Jake Tapper interviewing Secretary of State Antony Blinken, suggesting that Musk needs to pay a price for this.
CEO Elon Musk has recently confirmed SpaceX CEO Elon Musk has recently confirmed a report that's in Walter Isaacson's new biography of Musk that last year Musk blocked access to his Starlink satellite network in Crimea in order to disrupt a major Ukrainian attack on the Russian Navy there. In other words, Musk effectively sabotaged a military operation by Ukraine, a U.S. ally, against Russia, an aggressor country that invaded a U.S. ally. Should there be repercussions for that?
Yeah, he should have a bag thrown over his head, and he should wake up in Guantanamo Bay being force-fed a protein shake through his ass by Meatball Ron DeSantis. That's the price he should pay, I guess. That would be a fitting punishment. Notice the Orwellian speak there. Notice the very subtle propaganda, very subtle dishonesty on his part. He effectively sabotaged a Ukrainian attack. Effectively sabotaged. Didn't actively sabotage it. Because actively sabotage it would meant that he disabled an existing system that they were already relying on to execute this attack against the Russian Navy. That's not what he did. He simply refused to expand the service to Crimea because Crimea was a red line. But Jake Tapper didn't tell you that. He couched it so that he can't technically be accused of lying. He said they effectively sabotaged Ukraine. Let's hear what Blinken has to say. I'm not going to watch this whole thing. It's about 3 minutes, but we'll hear the response.
Jake, I can't speak to a specific episode. Here's what I can tell you. Starlink has been a vital tool for the Ukrainians to be able to communicate with each other, and particularly for the military to communicate in their effort to defend all of Ukraine's territory. It remains so, and I would expect it to continue to be critical to their efforts. So what we would hope and expect is that that technology will remain fully available to the Ukrainians. It is vital to what they're doing.
Okay, so you see how he has to be diplomatic in his response. And it's certainly not like the Biden administration to have kind words for Elon, but they have to be careful because, as Blinken said, Ukraine is currently relying on Starlink and on SpaceX, which means they are relying on Elon Musk. And if Elon Musk has proved himself to be one thing, it is an erratic and impulsive asshole. And so they push him too far, he could actually disable it. And they probably don't want him to do that. So you saw Blinken there being far more diplomatic than Jake Tapper, who wants consequences for Elon Musk for not obeying the order, right, or complying with the wishes, with the directives of the Ukrainian fighting forces. And so just a fascinating episode there of certain elements of the military-industrial complex having gone rogue. But like I said, Elon has fuck you money, right? I mean, this is why you don't do business with a guy like that when you need someone who's going to cooperate. Pardon me. You do business with people who are, wealthy, but not top 5 in the world wealthy, right? You need people who are going to feel like they have to stay on your good side to keep the money coming in because they need the money. Elon doesn't need the money. He didn't want the money. He started out donating the services. At one point, he said he was going to have to start being paid, but then he backed off of that and said, all right, you know what? You can have it for free.
Please clap.